Class 9 Biology Chapter 2 Tissues Video number 3. Students, in this video I am going to discuss about the two animal tissues. One is the epithelial tissues, under which I will be discussing about the features and functions of different types of epithelial tissues, and then I will be discussing about the features and functions of various types of connective tissues. As already told to you that in case of multicellular organisms there is a division of labor. That is, in case of multicellular organisms, cells of similar type, they are organized to form tissues. Okay, so both plants and animals' body is made up of tissues. About the plant tissues we have already discussed, and there I had told you that the plants have got a very simple structural organization. So now let us study about the different types of animal tissues that are present in our body. Right? So as an example which is given in your NCERT book, let us take this as the act of breathing. So what happens when you breathe? When you breathe, you must have seen your chest, it moves up and down. Right? This movement of chest helps you to take in air or to exhale air, and this movement is brought because of the contraction and relaxation of muscles which are present between the ribs and the diaphragm. So there is diaphragm below the chest cavity, and between the ribs there are muscles present. When they contract, the chest moves up and you take in air, and when they relax, the chest moves down and you exhale. So these muscles are examples, one of the example of animal tissue. And also, once you have taken in air and air has reached the lungs, from the lungs this air has to be taken to all the different parts of the body. Okay, so it's to be taken to all body parts, right? And what transports it to different parts of the body? It is the blood. So it is the blood which transports oxygen to each and every living cell of the body, and where inside the cell you have already learned that the mitochondria will use this oxygen for oxidation of food and release of energy. Food, as you all have learned or you are quite aware of, that you take in food through your mouth, the food gets digested in the small intestine, and from there this food is taken to all the living cells of your body again by blood. So blood not only transports respiratory gases, it transports the food, that is the digested food, it transports waste materials and many other materials from one part of the body to other part. And so blood and muscle, in this example that we have taken, blood and muscles, these are the examples of animal tissues. Now based upon the functions that the tissues perform, there are four basic types of animal tissues, and they are the epithelial tissues, the connective tissues, the muscular tissue, and the nervous tissue. So now let us learn about all these one by one. Before that, here is a flow chart to show you the basic animal tissues that are present in our body. So animal tissue, as just now I've told you, are of four types, namely the epithelial, the muscular tissue, the connective tissues, and the nervous tissue. Now the epithelial tissues are of various kinds, and you will be learning about the squamous epithelium, cuboidal epithelium, columnar epithelium, ciliated, and glandular epithelium. The muscular tissues are of three types: striated or voluntary muscles, smooth or involuntary muscles, and the cardiac muscles. The connective tissues, they are of various kinds, namely blood, lymph, bone, cartilage, areolar tissue, adipose tissue, tendons, and ligament. And finally, the nervous tissue. So here we'll be learning about all these tissues in detail. So let us first start with the epithelial tissue, which is the basic or fundamental animal tissues that forms a protective covering of the body. So all the body organs and the cavities, means what? Your entire body surface. Okay, so the entire body surface, that is your skin. Then internally you have got many organs present. So all the organs, the stomach from outside, from inside, or the small intestine, large intestine, each and every organ of your body and the cavities of those organs, they are all lined by this epithelial tissue. So epithelial tissue is the lining tissue. Okay, here you find that like any organ that you have got, they'll be having first epithelium as a covering, and then below that you'll have all the other tissues that are present. So epithelium forms a protective covering of the body. Since the epithelium is a protective covering, you find that the cells of the epithelium are tightly packed. Okay, they are compactly packed with hardly any intercellular space. So you don't find any intercellular space. Okay, and the matrix, which is the cementing substance between the cell, is also quite less. So cells are tightly packed because epithelium is a protective tissue. So it protects the underlying tissues, the connective tissues, the nervous tissues which are there below. They're all protected by this epithelium. So what is exposed to outside will be the free surface of epithelium. There will be the outside part, and below this epithelium you have all the other tissues present. So one important feature of the epithelium is the cells of the epithelium are compactly packed without intercellular space. Not much of space is present, not much of the cementing material between the cells is present. Also, one more very important thing is that since all your body cavities, all the organs that you have, take an example, let it be your lungs or your small intestine, large intestine, stomach, take any organ. Every organ from inside and outside has a lining of epithelium. So anything to enter or leave has to cross at least one layer of epithelium. Like for example, when you breathe. Okay, here there's a diagram. So when you breathe, right? So when you breathe, your air, that is when you take in air, oxygen enters, and then when it reaches the lungs, inside the lungs you'll have the alveoli, which are the air sac. So when it reaches the lungs, there is oxygen. From here it has to go into the blood capillary, which is present outside these air sacs. So the air sac has got a lining of epithelium. Your blood capillaries has a lining of epithelium. So oxygen has to cross these epithelial layers, and only then it will enter your blood. That means that anything to enter or leave has to cross at least one layer of epithelium. That's a very important feature. And so the permeability of epithelium is very important. Okay, the permeability of epithelium is quite important because that determines the exchange of materials between the body and the external environment. Okay, so this is a very important feature. Other important feature of epithelium is that whatever kind of epithelium it is, you find that all epithelial tissues rest over a non-cellular basement membrane. So there's a basement membrane present, and this basement membrane, there's a basement membrane present below the epithelium. Whatever kind of epithelium it is, you'll have the epithelial cells, then you'll have the basement membrane, and below the basement membrane you'll have connective tissue or any other kind of tissue, right? So every epithelial tissue rests over this basement membrane. So these are the features of epithelium. That is, it forms a barrier to keep different body systems separate. It, since it is a protective tissue, the cells of the epithelium are tightly packed as continuous sheet with almost no intercellular space present and very little amount of cementing material present, and anything to enter or leave the cell has to cross at least one layer of epithelium. And as stated at the end, all epithelium, whatever kind of epithelial tissue it is, it rests over in extracellular fibrous basement membrane. So let us now study about the different types of epithelial tissues. On the basis of the number of layers the epithelial tissue is made up of, epithelium can either be simple epithelium or it can be stratified epithelium. Okay. Simple epithelium is the epithelial tissue which is made up of just one layer of cell. Okay, so if the epithelial tissue is made up of one layer of cell, it is called as simple epithelium. Okay, and when if it is made up of many layers of cells, then it is said to be as stratified epithelium. Based upon the shape of the cells, the epithelial is of different kinds. So let us see what are those different types. If the epithelial tissue is made up of cells which are flat, then that's called as squamous epithelium. If the cells of the epithelium are cubical in cross section, it's called as cuboidal epithelium. And if the cells of the epithelial tissue is long or tall pillar like or column like, then it's called as columnar epithelium. Okay, so these are on the basis of the shape, these are the three types of epithelial tissue, that is simple, squamous epithelium, cuboidal epithelium, and columnar epithelium. So now let us study about the features and functions of each of these epithelial tissues. So first, the squamous epithelium. Okay, so squamous epithelial tissue, when you see the, have a look at this picture or the diagram, you find that the cells of this squamous epithelium are thin and flat. Okay, so the cells are thin and flat, and you'll have a central nucleus. In the center, you'll find a flattened nucleus present, right? So the cells are uninucleate and they are thin and flat. Okay, and you find these squamous epithelium, it can be either simple or stratified. So simple squamous epithelium, you find that it's just made up of one layer of cell, and below this layer, as already told to you, there is the basement membrane present. The simple squamous epithelium, you find it in as a lining. The simple squamous epithelium, you find it as a lining of the alveoli. Okay, so alveoli, these are the air, they are also called as the air sacs. So air sacs, they are present in the lungs, and it is when you inhale air, air enters through the respiratory tract and finally fills the lungs. So your lungs have got such balloon like structures which are called as alveoli or the air sacs, and the diffusion of gases will occur through the alveolar wall. So the wall of the alveoli is made up of simple squamous epithelium. It's just made up of one layer of cell of squamous epithelium, right? Similarly, the blood capillaries, where exchange of material has to happen. So these blood capillaries also are made up of just one layer of squamous epithelium. So this lining of the blood capillary, it is made up of squamous epithelium, and since it is one layer, it is a simple squamous epithelium. So simple squamous epithelium forms a lining of air sacs and the blood capillaries where exchange of gases or the exchange of materials occurs. So that's a main function of the simple squamous epithelium. Now the lining of the mouth cavity, the esophagus, and your skin. It is made up of stratified squamous epithelium. It is the same epithelial tissue, but it is multi-layered. The cells are multi-layered. Okay, so as the epithelial tissue in the skin or the lining of mouth cavity or the esophagus, it is multi-layered. It is called as the stratified squamous epithelium. And the function of this stratified squamous epithelium in all these regions is to provide protection. Okay, protection is a main function of epithelium. So it provides protection, and it also protects the underlying tissues, because below the epithelial tissue you'll find connective tissues and other animal tissues present. So the underlying tissues are protected from all kinds of wear and tear. So it protects the stratified epithelial tissue, protects the underlying tissues from wear and tear. Due to friction, the outer layers of epithelium, they get removed and fresh cells are added from below. So this thereby the underlying tissues are protected from wear and tear. So here this is the structure of the epithelium that makes your skin. So your skin is made of stratified squamous epithelium, which is multi-layered. From the outer surface the cells keep on getting removed, and from the lower surface new cells are added. Other type of epithelial tissue is the cuboidal epithelium, and in cuboidal epithelial tissues you find that the cells of the tissue, they are cubical or cube-like in a cross section. Each cell has got a centrally placed round nucleus, right? So here this is the simple cuboidal epithelium, and if suppose a cuboidal epithelium is multi-layered, it will be referred to as the stratified cuboidal epithelium. A simple cuboidal epithelium, you find in the tubules of the kidney. try to recall if you can. This is, you might have learned in your junior classes that the kidneys have filtration units which are called as nephrons. Okay, and these nephrons, they help in filtration of blood and formation of urine. So the tubular portion of this nephron that you see, this tubular portion of nephron, their wall is made up of this cuboidal epithelium. Okay, and there the function of this cuboidal epithelium is secretion and absorption. So in the tubules of kidneys, the simple cuboidal epithelium is involved in secretion and absorption, whereas the ducts of glands like salivary gland, bile duct, all the ducts, they are also made up of this cuboidal epithelium, and there the function of cuboidal epithelium is to give mechanical support. Okay, so they give mechanical support and protection. So that's a main function. So this is the location of cuboidal epithelium, right? The next important type of epithelial tissue is the columnar epithelium. The columnar epithelial tissues, they are made up of long or tall pillar-like cells with a elongated nucleus present at the base, right? And these columnar epithelium, you find them, they line the intestine, the small intestine, the inner wall of the small intestine. If this, the inner wall of the small intestine is lined by these columnar epithelium, where absorption becomes a main function. Okay, so we take if this is a small intestine, so internally if you see the small intestine, the inner wall of small intestine is made up of villi. Try to recall, you must have learned this in your class, junior classes. So inner wall of the small intestine is broken into finger-like projections which are called as villi. Okay, and these villi increases the surface area for absorption of digested food. So one villi, if you just expand and see, you find that the villi, this is one villi. Okay, so these villi, you find that the wall of the villi is made up of these columnar epithelium, which helps in, or they increase the surface area for absorption of digested food. Okay. On the basis of the functions that they perform, the epithelial tissues are of various kinds. Two of the kinds that you have to study is, one is ciliated epithelium and other is the glandular epithelium. Right? Now, in your respiratory tract, have a look at this picture. So, in the respiratory tract, if a cross section of it is taken and seen, you find that the inner wall of the respiratory tract has columnar epithelium which has cilia on its free surface. So such a type of epithelial tissue having cilia on its free surface is called as ciliated columnar epithelium. This is called as the ciliated columnar epithelium. And the role of ciliated columnar epithelium is, when the cilia beats, when it moves, it creates an upward current which pushes the mucus, because internally the throat will be having mucus with trapped dust particles. So the current which is created will push the mucus in the forward direction so that it can be thrown out and the throat can be cleared. Now the epithelial tissue can also be modified to form glands. Like in many parts of our body, you've got glands, like you've got sweat glands in your skin, oil glands, then you've got endocrine glands which produce hormones. So there it is actually the epithelial tissue, the epithelium which forms the outer covering. In certain places, like if it is to form the gland, the epithelium may fold inwards and then form multicellular glands. These multicellular glands, they may produce different types of secretions, like they may produce enzymes or digestive juices. Like this is a digestive gland, you've got the intestinal glands, right? So these glands, they produce secretions, and these secretions, they are poured to outside. So they will be produced by the glands and the secretions will be poured to outside on the outer surface, right? So if the epithelium folds inwards and it gets specialized to produce secretions, then it is called as glandular epithelium. like you've got the sweat gland secreting sweat, you've got the oil gland secreting oil, or the various kinds of digestive glands which produce different types of digestive juices, or you've got the mammary glands which produce milk, and then so these or endocrine glands which produce different types of hormones. The next animal tissue is the connective tissue. Connective tissue is a fundamental animal tissue having scattered cells which are present or embedded in the matrix. Okay, there is huge amount of matrix or intercellular material present between the cells, and these connective tissues help in binding, connecting, packing, and supporting various body parts. So in case of epithelial tissues that I had discussed just now, I told you that the cells of epithelium are tightly packed with hardly any intercellular space present between the cell, and the matrix or the intercellular cementing material is also quite less. But in case of connective tissue, you find that the cells of connective tissue are quite widely spaced, that is, they are all scattered, right? And there is huge amount of matrix is the substance which is present between the cell, so huge amount of matrix is present in case of the connective tissues. This is the picture of blood, where you find there are blood cells which are present, and between the blood cells, that is RBC, WBC, and platelets present, and in between that you find there is matrix which is called as plasma. You all are quite aware of what is plasma. Plasma is a fluid part of the blood, so plasma is present, and in the plasma these blood cells float, right? So here you find, in case of connective tissue, the cells are scattered in matrix, and this matrix which is present between the cells, they are secreted by these living cells. So it is the cells of the connective tissue, the living cells of the connective tissue secrete this matrix. Now the matrix of this connective tissue can be either solid, liquid, or like jelly, right? So the connective tissues which have jelly-like matrix includes the areolar tissue, adipose tissue, ligament, and tendon, whereas bone and cartilage have a solid matrix, and blood and lymph, they have a liquid matrix. So now let us study about the different types of connective tissues. The first, the most basic connective tissue that is there in our body, the most abundant connective tissue which is there in our body is the areolar tissue. Okay, so this areolar tissue, it is a simple connective tissue which has got a jelly-like matrix. So here this diagram that you see is a cross section of areolar tissue where you find cells of various kinds present, or they are scattered. In other words, we can say they are scattered in the matrix. You've got cells like called as macrophages, you've got the fibroblasts, there are mast cells which are present, and these mast cells and the macrophages, they help you to give protection against infection or any foreign material that enters. There are fibroblasts that are present in this areolar tissue. The function of fibroblast is to make fibers. There are proteinaceous fibers that are present, which are the collagen fibers, which are white in color. You've got yellow elastin fibers also present. So these fibroblasts, they secrete these fibers which give strength and elasticity to the tissue, right? So here this diagram that you see is that of areolar tissue, where you find various kinds of cells which are embedded in this matrix, and the matrix is secreted by these cells which are present in the areolar tissue. Now coming to the location of areolar tissue, the areolar tissue is present below the skin. So your skin is attached to the muscles by means of areolar tissue. Okay, the areolar tissue is also present around the blood vessels, around the nerves. Like nerves will have huge number of nerve fibers. So many nerve fibers, they are wrapped together by this areolar tissue, and that forms the nerves. So areolar tissue is present around the blood vessels, they are present around the nerves, they help in joining. As I said you just now, they join structures like muscles are connected to the skin by means of areolar tissue. Now, coming to the functions of areolar tissue, it binds various structures to one another. As just now I've said you that the muscles are connected to bones by means of areolar tissue, and all the organs that are present in your body. There are many organs present, and those organs are not just hanging inside the body in the body cavity. Rather, they are all attached to one another or to the body wall by means of areolar tissue, so that when there is movement, the organs that are there will not get dislocated. Okay, so that's a function of areolar tissue. That is, it binds various structures with one another, preventing their dislocation during movement. Then the areolar tissue forms the covering of nerves, blood vessels, and the muscles. Then the next important function of the areolar tissue is that it forms a packaging material in various organs. So all the spaces inside the organs, they are filled up by this areolar tissue, and the areolar tissue also provides materials which are required for repair after injury. So these are some of the important functions performed by the areolar tissue. The next important tissue that is present in our body is adipose tissue, which is specialized to store fat. So this adipose tissue is present in our body or the body of animals, and this is specialized to store fat. How it is specialized, let us see. This diagram that you see is that of adipose tissue, a section of adipose tissue, and inside the adipose tissue you find there are large cells. These cells that you see, they are called as adipocytes. These cells are called as adipocytes. These adipocytes, each of these adipocytes have got a central large fat droplet. One or more, one or two generally. Large fat droplet or globule is present in the center with the cytoplasm and nucleus present towards the periphery. So these fat droplets store the fat, right? And thus the adipose tissue is a storehouse of energy because it stores huge amount of fat. And apart from this, you find that there are those collagen fibers, there is elastin fiber. These are protein fibers. As I said you, they are secreted by the fibroblasts, like that of areolar tissue. They are present, right? And the main function of adipose tissue is to store fat, which is used as a source of energy. Location: the adipose tissue is present below the skin. Below the skin, this adipose tissue forms an insulating layer which is protecting you from the loss of heat. So, the tissue which is present below the skin acts like an insulating layer. Then, the adipose tissue is also present as a cushion around soft organs like eyes, heart, and kidneys. Thus, these tissue they form shock absorbing cushions around these important organs, protecting them from mechanical shocks and injuries. And the adipose tissue is also present in the yellow bone marrow. And the main function, I said you, that it stores fat which is used as an energy reserve. Both adipose tissue and the areolar tissues have a jelly like matrix. Next, we have ligaments. Ligaments are yellow fibrous connective tissue with considerable strength and high elasticity. These are highly elastic, right? And these ligaments, they join one bone to other at the joints. So due to the flexibility or higher elasticity of the ligaments, the movements of various kinds are possible at the joints. The next is the tendon. Tendons are white fibrous connective tissues with huge strength and limited flexibility or elasticity. The tendons, they join the muscles to the bones. So tendons join these muscles to the bones because movement will be because of contraction and relaxation of muscles. And when the muscles move, the bones are moved, right? So when they contract and relax, the movement occurs. And so to make this possible, the muscles are connected to bones. These muscles, they are connected to bones by means of tendons. right? So here is the difference between ligaments and tendons. Ligaments are yellow fibrous connective tissues with considerable strength and great elasticity, whereas tendons are white fibrous connective tissues with great strength and limited elasticity. The ligaments join the bones to another bone at the joint, whereas the tendons join the muscles to the bones. Study about the supportive connective tissues which are present in our body. They are the bones and cartilage, right? Bones are the connective tissues which are rigid. The bones, they are rigid, they are non-flexible, and they are porous. Why porous? Because internally the bones have supply of blood and fibers. So they are porous, non-flexible and rigid connective tissues that forms a supportive framework of the body, your skeletal system. The framework that we have is mainly made up of bones, right? Now the cross section of bone, if we take, like if suppose this is a bone and if a transverse section of it is taken and seen, you find that the bones, they have got matrix which is arranged in concentric rings. So they have rings, and these matrix, they are laid around a Haversian canal. Haversian canal, in this diagram that you see, this is a transverse section, so this is the location of Haversian canal. But in a longitudinal section, they are like canals, right? So in a longitudinal section you find these Haversian canals which carry the blood capillaries and the nerve fibers. So around the Haversian canals the matrix is laid. The matrix contains the phosphates and carbonates of magnesium and calcium. So the matrix of bone has got mineral deposition, which you find quite less in case of cartilage, and due to this mineral deposition the bones become quite rigid. Okay, they are much rigid when compared to that of the cartilages, right? So and these matrix, you also embedded in the matrix you find those cells of the bones which are called as osteocytes. So here this is one osteocyte shown in the picture. So these osteocytes are the bone cells which secrete the matrix, and they are also arranged in concentric rings. Cartilage is also a supportive connective tissue like that of bone, but it is much flexible when compared to that of bone. It is flexible, it is non-porous because cartilages internally do not have a supply of blood capillaries, whereas bones, the cartilages will have a supply of blood only on outside, but bones have got a supply of blood capillaries inside also. So these are non-porous, they are flexible, supportive connective tissue, right? And the matrix of cartilage is homogeneous. In case of bone, I had told you that matrix is arranged in concentric rings, but in case of cartilage, the matrix is homogeneous, and this matrix is mainly composed of proteins and sugar. Okay, so this forms a protein and sugar. In the matrix you'll find in small groups these cells of cartilage which are called as chondroblasts. They are arranged in groups of 2 to 4 and in cavities which are called as lacunae. So now let us differentiate between the two types of supportive connective tissue, that is bone and cartilage. Bones are solid, rigid, strong, non-flexible, supportive connective tissue, whereas cartilages, they are firm but not as strong as bone but flexible, supportive connective tissue. The matrix of bone has depositions of phosphates and carbonates of calcium and magnesium, whereas the matrix of cartilage is made up of proteins and sugars, and mineral deposition is minimum. This is the reason why the cartilages are flexible, much flexible than the bones. Then the bones, where are they located? Your entire endoskeleton is mainly made up of bones. So huge number of bones are present in our body. Whereas cartilages, they are present in certain region like your nose tip, the voice box, the intervertebral discs, the longer bones, ends of the longer bones, and your outer ear or ear pinna is made up of these the cartilage. And one more important thing to note is that the endoskeleton or internal skeleton of shark is totally made up of cartilage. Coming to the function of bones and cartilage, the bones, they form supportive framework of the body. They provide surface for attachment of muscles. Okay, so bones provide surface for attachment of muscles, and muscles are connected to the bones by means of the connective tissue called as the tendon. And other important function of bone is it provides protection to important internal organs. On the other hand, the cartilages, though they are strong but not as strong as bones, they form the supportive framework. They form a part of the supportive framework, but they provide flexibility to the bones, and they cover the ends of the longer bones so that when the bones meet at the joint and when the bones are moving at the joint, there is little friction. Okay, so they protect the ends of the bones from wear and tear when the bones move at the joints. Next important connective tissue is blood. Blood is a fluid connective tissue. It is fluid connective tissue because the matrix of blood is liquid. Okay, and it is called as plasma. So if suppose a 5 ml or so of blood is taken and it is kept in a test tube and leave it suspended for some time, after some time you will find a yellow color, light yellow color fluid on the top and red colored substance at the bottom. So the top you have got the matrix of blood which is called as plasma, and the bottom part, you'll, if you take a small amount of it and see, you'll find all kinds of blood cells, that is RBC, WBC and platelets. So blood is a fluid connective tissues which is made up of a liquid matrix called as plasma, and the blood cells, namely RBC, that is red blood cells or red blood corpuscles, WBC, that is white blood cell or white blood corpuscles, and platelets. Blood is red in color because of the presence of respiratory pigment called as hemoglobin that's present in the red blood cell, and the role of hemoglobin is it transports oxygen. You all might be knowing it transports oxygen, right? Now plasma, the plasma makes 55% of blood. It is a matrix of blood, and here the plasma is mainly made up of water. So 92% of plasma is water, and the rest 8% includes ions, proteins, nutrients, waste and gases, right? And the three types of blood cells which are present in the blood are RBC, which transports oxygen, WBC, that protects you from infections, and platelets, which help in clotting of blood. So coming to the functions of blood, blood transports nutrients, hormones, respiratory gases, waste materials, and from one region to other region. The RBC transports oxygen, WBC fights infections, and platelets help in clotting of blood.